Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. So this video is going to be a bit different because being a vampire I find it interesting learning about human psychology. But nah, seriously, I am really into psychology and how it works, what makes people tick. I am also into true crime because I am interested in the reasons why people do various crimes. But I have recently gone on, like, when I do have some downtime, I just love watching videos about, controversial science experiments and stuff like that. So today I thought, well, why not cover them on my channel? Because it's easy enough to go down the YouTube rabbit hole, especially when it comes to psychology and that sort of stuff. It is something that has always interested me. I don't work in psychology. I'm not clever enough for that. I'm not book smart. I'm more hardworking. So yeah, it's not something I can do as a career. So by all means, I'm not qualified in any sense. It's just an interest of mine. My job is completely different. But yeah, so today I'm gonna be. Now you've probably heard of it because these are gonna be popular ones I'm gonna go through. But it is one that has intrigued me, and it's one of the first ones I read about. So this is the Stanford Prison Experiment. So I'll link this website in the description below. But basically this one, it kind of separates into different parts, which I find really useful. Instead of just one big block of text going on. So the key takeaways are: first, the aim. The experiment was conducted in 1971 by psychologist Philip Zimbardo to examine situational forces versus dispositions in human behaviour. So that'll be, so for this one, the prison experiment, I know they got kids, half of them had the role of the prison officers and half of them were the prisoners. So that'll be the situational force of more. It'd be more so the force on the officers to to punish the prisoners and keep them in line, basically. The methodology is 24 male college students were screened for psychological health and randomly assigned to be either prisoners or guards in a simulated prison environment set up in the basement of Stanford let's try that again. In the basement of Stanford sociological. Oh God, I can't get words out. Sorry about this, guys. But yeah, it's in the building. So yeah, so the chosen at random, and they got screened. Realistic conditions. So the prisoners were arrested at their homes without warning and subjected to booking procedures to enhance the realism of the simulation. They were then placed in cells, given uniforms, and referred to by assigned numbers. So it's just real from the get-go. It's not like they just turned up at the school and it's just like, oh yeah, another day I'm gonna be doing this experiment. No, it is literally from the moment they wake up, they are being treated like prisoners to make it really immersive, I guess. And I guess that's partly why it's so controversial, which I do get. I mean, full on kidnapping students in the homes, making them live in cells, giving them uniforms, calling them by name, so by number. I can understand that one. Results: men assigned as guards began behaving sadistically, inflicting humiliation and suffering on the prisoners. Prisoners became blindly obedient and allowed themselves to be dehumanized. The experiment had to be terminated after only 6 days due to the extreme pathological behaviour emerging in both groups. So it'll be the guards taking it too far. I guess it's that thing, isn't it, where where you go from, because these are students as well. So I guess it's like, you're giving an everyday person, and then all of a sudden they're given authority, especially over other people or the peers, but they don't see them as peers, they see them as prisoners. So I guess they see them as below them. and so they took it too far with how they was treating the prisoners. And then obviously the prisoners, they just, I guess it would wreak havoc having like being just in that environment. I mean, not even being able to be called the human names, like, the be referred to as a number. I mean, that's degrading enough. And having to wear the uniforms, being in the cells all the time, and then that's without the guards being a bit too hands-on, should we say. So, conclusion. The experiment demonstrated the power of situations to alter human behaviour drastically. Even good, normal people can do evil things when situational forces push them in that direction. So yeah, so that'll be the one with the guards. Because, like, I said earlier, there's just 24 regular students randomly assigned prisoners or guards, and it was interesting to see when you give the ones power, how to misuse that just because they can. Right, so ethics. Several prisoners showed signs of extreme emotional disturbance. Despite having the right to withdraw, the experiment's immersive nature made it difficult for them to exercise that right. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's one of those, like, for the prisoners, I do feel for them because, yeah, they could have left at any time, but they probably didn't feel like they could, because when you're in that sort of environment, I guess it would be difficult to say, no, I'm done. Especially, like, you're being degraded all the time. Like it said that there was being submissive and stuff. So when you're in that situation, it's difficult to get yourself out of that situation. It is insanely difficult, especially, with how immersive it was. I mean, they got arrested in their own homes from the very start, so it is a very immersive experiment that they did. And then lastly, there is researcher bias. So Zimbardo, acting as both principal investigator and the prison superintendent, became emotionally invested and delaying halting the experiment, which may see a direct conflict of interest and a lapse in objectivity. So yeah, I mean, when you're doing these like social experiments, you've got to be you've got to be completely neutral, or else it's not going to work, or you're not going to get accurate results. You got to try and be as neutral as possible, because if you get too emotionally invested, I mean, like, even subconsciously, you're gonna, this was causing it to delay the experiment from stopping it. I mean, I know it only lasted 6 days, but if it should have stopped earlier, it must have been pretty bad what was going on. I mean, like, I'll dive into more of the details, but yeah, you've got to try and distance yourself from doing stuff like this, because it can affect the outcome and the research gained from it, especially when it is the ones that we are discussing and the more controversial ones where you put people in really bad situations. I mean, like, obviously I know that they're consenting stuff, but with these, you don't truly know what you're gonna be put through. And I do feel sorry for the people that are involved in these, especially when they feel like they can't stop, even though they're really suffering and they don't feel like they can stop. And then if at the end of it, they don't really come up with much at the end of it, but like, well, what was the point in all that? What was the point in all my suffering? I mean, like, I don't condone it by any means, but if you got results at the end of it and it helped, like, us learn more about psychology and stuff, and I mean, yeah, fair enough. But if you go through all of that and then at the end, because the researcher was too biased, you didn't get, like, the outcome wasn't useful, the findings wasn't useful, you'd be like, well, why did I go through all of that? Like, if that was me, if I was in one of those, I'd want the results to be useful and used. For psychology, I wouldn't want it to be, oh yeah, we can't use these results now because the researcher was showed too much of a bias. We'd be like, well, why have I just done all that? Like, that's just my thoughts anyway. So let's get crack-a-lacking. So the aim. Zimbardo and his colleagues in 1973 were interested in finding out whether the brutality reported among guards in American prisons was due to the sadistic personalities of the guards, or have more to do with the prison environment. So this will be the dispositional or the situational stresses. So it'd be, was the guards already had these personality traits that there's sadistic and going too far with the prisoners, or was it because they are literally in a prison? So for example, prisoners and guards may have personalities that make conflict inevitable, with prisoners lacking respect for law and order and guards being domineering and aggressive. Alternatively, prisoners and guards may behave in a hostile manner due to the rigid power structure environment in prisons. Zimbardo predicted the situation made people act the way they do rather than the personality. So yeah, he was testing his theory that you can change anyone that will be deemed as a good person, basically, with good morals, that showed no signs of being manipulative or domineering or aggressive. But then when you chuck them in the prison and you give them that power, you can change that person. So that's what makes it quite interesting to me, to be honest. So procedure, recruitment and screening. So call for volunteers. Philip Zimbardo placed an advertisement asking for volunteers to participate in a study of the psychological effects of prison life. And 75 men responded to the ad. The volunteers were interviewed and took personality tests designed to screen out any with psychological issues, medical conditions, or histories of crime/drug abuse. So yeah, to screen them at the start to make sure that they could get it as fair as possible, I guess. Especially choosing volunteers that didn't have any sort of history of crime or psychological or mental conditions. That does make sense to try and get the best results, because you're going to get the more accurate results, sort of thing, to see if it is the environment that is causing this. And the final selection, so only 24 men deemed physically and mentally stable, mature and least involved in antisocial behaviours were chosen. 2 were held in reserve. 1 participant dropped out, leaving 10 prisoners and 11 guards. So random assignments and compensation. Random roles. Participants were randomly assigned to be either prisoners or guards. Neither group knew each other beforehand. Payment. Each participant was paid $15 per day for the duration of the experiment. Consider this was back in the day, because it was like 1973. Yeah, 1973. That's pretty decent, to be fair. So, day 1. Setting stage and initial arrest. So, surprise arrest. Prisoners were unexpectedly arrested at their homes without prior warning. Local police officers assisted in taking them into custody to add realism. At the station, the prisoners were fingerprinted, photographed and formally booked. After booking, each prisoner was blindfolded and driven to the mock prison located in the basement of Stanford University's psychological department. So it's quite immersive, to be fair. So they get literally arrested at the homes, and then they get booked in like a normal criminal would, entering the mock prison. So the basement had barred doors, windows, small cells and bare walls, carefully arranged to resemble an actual detention facility. And upon arrival, the prisoners were stripped naked and deloused, relieved of personal possessions, issued smock-like clothing labelled with ID numbers only, given a tight nylon cap to cover their hair, fitted with a lockable chain around one ankle. Loss of identity. Prisoners were referred to solely by their assigned numbers, a tactic intended to induce anonymity and submission. And to be fair, that sounds like it did the job. So yeah, it was proper immersive then. So no holding back, really. So now we talk about the guards. So the guard attire. The guards wore identical khaki uniforms and sported reflective glasses that concealed eye contact. They also carried a whistle and police-style billy club. Shifts. 3 guards worked in 8-hour rotations with additional guards on call if needed. Though informed that no physical violence was permitted, guards were told to do whatever was necessary to maintain order and command respect. So that's an interesting one. So they put a limit on physical violence, but mentally they could do whatever they needed to maintain order and command respect from the prisoners. So that is quite interesting how they didn't put a limit on the mental side of things. I guess he was trying, because there is still a lot that people can do mentally to mess someone up. So it's quite interesting how they did that. So now we've gone to observing and role playing. So Zimbardo's dual role. Zimbardo oversaw the experiment as a psychologist, but also assumed the role of the warden, monitoring both guards and prisoners. First impressions: at the end of day 1, conditions were tense, but largely uneventful. The stage was set for the accelerated role adoption and power struggles that would soon follow. So, findings after day 1. Within a very short time, both guards and prisoners were settling into their new roles, with the guards adopting theirs quickly and easily. The guards exhibited increased authoritarian and abusive behaviours, while the prisoners displayed signs of psychological distress, passivity, and even emotional breakdowns. The experiment, initially planned for 2 weeks, was halted after only 6 days due to the unexpectedly rapid and intense negative psychological effects on the participants. So now we're going to day 2, so this will be the first full day where they've actually woke up in the prison. So, early harassment. Within hours of beginning the experiment, some guards began to harass prisoners. At 2:30 a.m, prisoners were awakened from sleep by blasting whistles for the first of many counts. The counts served as a way to familiarise the prisoners with their numbers. More importantly, they provided a regular occasion for the guards to exercise control over the prisoners. Growing submission. The prisoners soon adopted prisoner-like behaviour too. They talked about prison issues a great deal of the time. They told tales on each other to the guards. They started taking the prison rules very seriously, as though they were there for the prisoners' benefit, and infringement would spell disaster for all of them. Some even began siding with the guards against prisoners who did not obey the rules. So, after an uneventful day 1, prisoners on day 2 staged a rebellion, removing their stocking caps, tearing off their ID numbers, and barricading themselves inside their cells. Guards were caught off guard. The relatively quiet first day had lured them into believing the prisoners would remain compliant. 3 off-duty guards rushed in to help. Meanwhile, the night shift guards voluntarily stayed on duty to help quell the disturbance, reflecting how quickly they united against any perceived threat to their authority. Putting down the rebellion. To regain control, the guards blasted the prisoners with a skin-chilling burst of carbon dioxide from a fire extinguisher, forcing them back from the doors. After breaking into cells, the guards stripped the prisoners naked and removed the beds. Ringleaders were taken to solitary confinement, a stark demonstration of power. Emboldened by their success, guards continued to humiliate and intimidate prisoners, setting a precedent for increasingly harsh tactics in the days to come. Privilege cell. Some prisoners deemed non-rebellious received privileges, which included better meals, restored uniforms, to sow discord among the group. One cell was designated for good prisoners who hadn't joined the rebellion. Those in the privileged cell got better meals, restored uniforms, and other small perks. By publicly rewarding compliant prisoners while punishing others, guards weakened group unity, heightened fear and mistrust among inmates. So that was the end of day 2. So that was quite interesting how quickly things have like escalated really. I mean, like compared to day 1 where people were settling in, but then day 2, I mean, there's a full-on riot going on from the prisoners. But then it was also surprising to see how the guards did rush and how quickly they did go to the extreme and abusing the power. So let's see what day 3 holds. By day 3, the dynamics in the makeshift prison had fundamentally changed. The guards moved from petty harassment to systematic domination, and most prisoners felt too intimidated to resist openly. This transformation shows how situational power, reinforced by fear and relentless pressure, can rapidly reshape a group's behaviour. Escalation of punishments. The prisoners were taunted with insults and petty orders. They were given pointless and boring tasks to accomplish, and they were generally dehumanised. Guards regularly forced prisoners to do push-ups, at times with other prisoners sitting on them, subjected them to verbal taunts, and assigned menial tasks like cleaning toilets by hand. The failure of the Day 2 rebellion emboldened the guards. They used group punishments to discourage solidarity, punishing the entire cell for one prisoner's perceived infraction. Growing submission. After witnessing the guards' forceful response on Day 2, many prisoners became increasingly anxious. They meticulously followed prison rules, ranging from standing a certain way during counts to fulfilling extra chores, hoping to avoid punishment. Some prisoners attempted to stay as inconspicuous as possible, limiting eye contact with guards and speaking only when spoken to. They feared that any defiance, however minor, would invite a harsher punishment. The fear led by certain prisoners to monitor each other. They scolded those who disobeyed rules and in some cases tattled on each other to the guards. This dynamic further broke down prisoner unity. Trapped in an environment of uncertainty, the men felt that there was no way out, turning compliance into a survival strategy. The psychological impact set the stage for the extreme stress reactions and breakdowns that followed. First emotional breakdown, prisoner number 8612. Less than 36 hours in, prisoner 8612 began experiencing uncontrollable crying, anger, and disorganised thinking. Guards labelled him weak, but offered a path to stay if he became an informant instead. So on returning to the cell, warning others, "You can't leave, you can't quit." So that's quite interesting. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, that's quite an interesting one. So that'll be on the second day that the first prisoner ended up having a mental breakdown because of this experiment. I mean, and things are escalating quite quickly. I mean, you know, if they're avoiding doing eye contact with the guards just out of fear, it sounds quite extreme, to be fair. I mean, I could see why they wanted the experiment to end sooner. And let's just see what the rest holds. So, by Day 4, fear and suspicion dominated the prison environment. Guards used the rumoured escape plot as a pretext to ramp up punishments, ensuring prisoners remained disorientated, exhausted, and compliant. This environment of unpredictable harassment and constant humiliation would grow even more intense in the experiment's final days. A visit from parents. Concerned that parents might be alarmed at the prison's grim conditions, guards made prisoners bathe, tidy up cells, and wear clean uniforms. They served a large meal and played music to create a welcoming facade. Despite these efforts, some parents worried about their son's well-being, sensing the underlying tension. Guards reassured them that everything was under control, but anxiety lingered. After rumours of a mass escape plan circulated, guards perceived a greater threat to their authority. They intensified surveillance and discipline, reasoning that extreme measures were justified to prevent any coordinated breakout. Prisoners were forced to scrub toilets with bare hands, endure prolonged sleep deprivation by constant disruptions at night, and submit to demeaning chores such as polishing guards' boots or cleaning imaginary messes. Guards sometimes woke prisoners at unpredictable hours to move them from cell to cell repeatedly. These prisoner shuffles eroded any sense of rest or routine. Randomly assigned chores like counting individual grains of rice or cleaning already spotless surfaces reinforced the guards' absolute control. Some guards took to publicly ridiculing prisoners, calling them insulting names or making them perform repetitive exercises in front of others. This created a climate of humiliation and isolation. Already shaken by earlier crackdowns and forced solidarity breaks, the inmates often complied automatically, driven by fear of solidarity, confinement, or worse. Any more resistance was met with swift group punishments. This heightened watchfulness only fueled anxiety among prisoners, reinforcing a sense of entrapment and powerlessness. The escalating cycle of control and submission set the stage for more severe breakdowns by day 5. Concerned the prisoners might attempt another mass uprising or literal escape, the guards and the experimenters contacted local authorities to explore additional security measures, an approach that signals how blurred the lines have become between the experiment simulated conditions and real world policing. So yeah, it's like it says now, it seems to be going quite far, especially if they're contacting outside assistance. You know, this is just, and well, it's supposed to be just an experiment, but things have very, very quickly turned very, very real. So let's see what day 5 brings. By day 5, the simulated prison's intense emotional toll was unmistakable. The combination of practices like random punishments, forced chanting, and solitary confinement, and psychological entrapment such as viewing exit as impossible placed inmates on the brink of collapse. The meltdown of prisoner number 819, followed by Zimbardo's critical reminder that this is just an experiment, captured both the depth of the prisoner's immersion and the experimenters' growing realisation that the situation was spinning out of control. A Catholic priest, formerly a prison chaplain, was invited to assess how realistic the prison environment was. Surprisingly, half the prisoners identified themselves only by their ID numbers. The priest told prisoners that hiring a lawyer was their best chance of leaving, emphasising how trapped they felt in the simulated incarceration. By day 5, the cumulative stress of random punishments, lost sleep, and an atmosphere of constant threat was profoundly unsettled the prisoners. Most had ceased any talk of revolt or group defiance following the failed rebellion on day 2. Despite technically having the right to leave, prisoners often behaved as though they were bound by a real sentence. Multiple breakdowns already witnessed, fear of further punishment or dismissal as weak kept many resigned to their fate. While meeting the priest, prison number 819 began sobbing uncontrollably. Researchers moved into a separate room to rest. Meanwhile, guards lined up all the other inmates and led them in chanting, "Prisoner 819 is a bad prisoner because of what prisoner 819 did. Marcel is a mess, Mr. Correctional Officer." Hearing the repeated chants, number 819 was overwhelmed by guilt, believing he had let down his fellow prisoners. Zimbardo intervened, reminding 819 that none of this was real, that the guards and prisoners were simply students, and that he could leave any time. In a moment of clarity, 819 recognised the experiment's artificial nature and agreed to go. Even as they continued to impose punishment, some guards seemed increasingly frustrated by the emotional vitality of the prisoners, who they saw as uncooperative and unpredictable. The research team, including Zimbardo, still tried to maintain the study's structure, yet the boundary between observational and active involvement blurred as they managed each emotional crisis and sought to avert further breakdowns. By the end of day 5, multiple prisoners had exhibited extreme stress and the guards were escalating their techniques. These pressures set the stage for the abrupt end of the experiment on day 6. So, let's see what the last day holds. So, day 6 demonstrates the tipping point at which the mounting abuses, emotional breakdowns, and an outsider's moral alarm forced the experiment's abrupt termination. While it failed to run the planned 2-week course, this dramatic ending cemented the Stanford Prison's experiment status as one of the most controversial and influential studies in social psychology. By day 6, the guards had grown increasingly emboldened, imposing stricter surveillance and more arbitrary punishments, with prisoners exhausted from insomnia, constant harassment, and severe emotional strain. Guard aggression reached a notable high point. Some guards seemed to relish their authority, devising more degrading tasks and verbally taunting prisoners who showed any sign of resistance or distress. Scenes of tearful pleas, panic, and rage had become commonplace among the inmates. Christina Maslach, a recent Stanford PhD, was brought in to interview the guards and prisoners. Until her arrival, most outside observers had accepted or even praised the realism of the simulation. Maslach was appalled by the guards' behaviour, witnessing verbal abuse and palpable fear among the prisoners. In her words, "It's terrible what you are doing to these boys." She openly challenged Zimbardo and his team, calling out their ethical violations and emotional harm. This frank contamination played a critical role in snapping Zimbardo out of his prison superintendent mindset. End of the experiment. Though originally intended to run 2 weeks, the experiment ended prematurely on the 6th day due to emotional breakdowns of prisoners and excessive aggression of the guards. Zimbardo later acknowledged how fully he had internalised the warden role. "I was thinking like a prison superintendent rather than a research psychologist. Maslach's intervention helped me see the study across ethical lines." So, conclusion. According to Zimbardo and his colleagues, the Stanford Prison Experiment revealed how people will readily conform to social roles they are expected to play, especially if the roles are as strongly stereotyped as those of prison guards. Because the guards were placed in a position of authority, they began to act in ways they would not usually behave in their normal lives. The prison environment was an important factor in creating the guards' brutal behaviour. None of the participants who acted as guards showed sadistic tendencies before the study, and I think that is a very important point. So before the study, like, if they showed no signs of sadistic tendency at all, and then they started showing it by day 2, I mean, that is extreme. So, I mean, I think that it kind of shows a lot, really, that, you know, I think the proof is in the pudding. I mean, I think putting people in the situation more so than the predetermined, traits that they had before, I think that did, well, kind of shows that it made a huge difference. So yeah, I mean, like, I'm just dumbfounded, really. I mean, just to think how quickly, like, both the guards and the prisoners, how quickly they adapted to the new roles and how far they actually took it. I know it wasn't physical, but all the mental stuff and how quickly they did. I mean, they made sure to screen everyone that did it and randomly assigned them, and they made it so immersive that everyone just naturally took to the new roles. I feel sorry for everyone that was in this. No doubt, especially the ones playing the prisoners. I mean, I know that the guards are going to feel guilty and everything, so I think everyone involved are just going to feel guilty and bad, and they probably got trauma going on still. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was, because it just sounds gnarly. I mean, I know that it only lasted 6 days, but I would not want that myself, and no doubt that they are probably still struggling, if they're still around at the moment. I just feel for them. But yeah, so that was the Stanford Prison Experiment. Let me know what you guys think. I'll be covering more of these sort of science experiments that were a bit controversial. I mean, yeah, it did prove a point, but I think there should have been better safeguards for the people participating. But it's like he said, he was thinking more. I think he just got into it too much himself, the one that was in charge of it. The psychologist is in charge of it, because he took on more of the role of the prison warden rather than a psychologist who was observing the experiment. I think it just went too far for everyone involved. I think it went too far with the guards taking it too far, the prisoners taking it too far, and also the psychologist taking it too far. I think there should have been better safeguarding measures in place, and tougher regulations, but we learn from it, and hopefully nothing like this happens again. But yeah, I'll so if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, feel free to subscribe to my channel. If you have anything that you'd like me to cover in the future, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next one.